In this episode, we're talking all things Kraken. Yes, the expansion draft for the Seattle Kraken. We'll touch base on what could have been with Carey Price, as well as the Shea Weber out for the season news. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Bonjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on the show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. What an eventful day. The Seattle Kraken Expansion Draft night it was, or at least it was supposed to be. From all the leaks, it was more of a day, I guess you could say. Oh my God. Joining to discuss the expansion and more are back in the show, John Barr, the man who helped bring the team, the 32nd officially team of the National Hockey League. You can follow him on Twitter at NHL2Seattle. John, welcome to the show. Welcome.
Thanks. Back. I'm glad to be back and talk some players too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, my pal covers the Canadians, Ian Boisvert. He's managing editor at Rabid Habs, and you can hear him also on the Nosebleeds cast, All Things Habs. You can find him on Twitter at Maybe It's Ian. Ian, it's been a couple of seconds, or in the seconds, it feels like a lifetime of news already.
I know. I feel like I've talked to you a whole bunch over the spring and into the summer, and every time it seems like I'm in a different state of mind depending on where the Canadians are at. Because Mark Bergevin's Canadians are always all over the place, but it seems like even more so over the past few months.
My goodness, it's crazy, and these stories are intertwining. We have Canadians baffling everybody with who's available for the Kraken to select. But let's get right to the night that it was last night. John, does it feel real yet? How was it witnessing the expansion draft?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty amazing. Ironically, that location is about 9 blocks from my house, so I literally walked to it, which allowed me to indulge a little bit once I was there. But it was a rowdy night. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, you certainly kind of or you talked about the leaks throughout the day, and there's no way I was staying off Twitter or anything. I had to know. But it was still an eventful day, and as many leaks as it seemed like we had, there were still quite a few fans that did not know, right? Whether they aren't on Twitter or just kind of intentionally stayed off it, because you could hear some reactions, and the biggest kind of obvious reaction, or the odd reaction, was when they announced Montreal's pick. So that was interesting. There was a little bit of like a lot of people wanted a certain player. I don't know who, but I think we'll talk about it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess Seattle's not on hockey Twitter yet, or at least some of their fans aren't.
Well, I mean, we have quite a few, but you're right. Like, I think there's a lot of people excited about the team, but they don't even know who to follow, right? And who to get on to, where to be. And it's going to take some time for them, because a lot of people did not know a lot of the players listed that were picked. And they aren't like, household names, but I know a good portion of them, not to mention, I've been studying these rosters for probably 2 years now. So there was no real surprise. I mean, there were a couple of surprises where, Ron Francis went a little off the grid, but I think for the most part, a lot of these have been kind of in the area that we expected them to pick. Some more than others, but for the most part, I think, I've heard of all these guys before.
Well, in terms of selecting the players to pick out of the current roster, then Who do you think really stands out as shocking for you? And then Ian, you can follow up after John. Who do you think it's like wow?
Well, there's a couple where, the important thing to think about is they had to pick 30 players, but there's not 30 NHL roster spots. And so you expect them to either trade somebody away or let them walk to free agency. And I think Chicago was an interesting one with they picked John Quinville, but he's a pending UFA. So he's going to walk. He's probably not going to re-sign with the Kraken, because they need to create space. But, Nikita Zadorov was kind of rumored, or Calvin DeHaan out of Chicago. Those are both pretty serviceable NHLers, but they essentially used Chicago's spot to let somebody walk to free agency. So that was a little surprising. And then Kurtis MacDermid in LA Kings, he's more of a heavyweight, if you will. That's something we didn't really see. That's probably not somebody we kind of targeted at all, but who knows? Maybe they figure they need to add some strength and some size, and so he's there. He's got one more year on his deal, so you kind of expect like he's going to be around.
Well, you do want to maybe get the fans into the game and have like a Ryan Reeves type player, as he's done well in Vegas. Yeah. So that'll be good to bring in the non-traditional hockey fans to see hockey fights in the game. So that'll be good. Ian, is there a guy that you think stands out or could be a breakout player for them?
Well, sort of the other way around. I was shocked that the Islanders, didn't protect Jordan Eberle. I mean, I really enjoy the game that Jordan Eberle plays. He's a slick, skilled forward. I think he's going to be loads of fun on that team, especially coming off of a team where almost scoring goals is discouraged. I don't mean to rip on the Islanders.
Yeah, I got you.
But they're, that's what they're built around. They're built around, we're going to get a 2-1 lead and try to hold it. I think Eberle's a really, really fun pick for them. I'm glad they had him there to take all that in. I think he'll become a pretty popular player there really quick.
Yeah. And as a Canadian, of course, I always will have those vintage memories of him in the junior scoring huge, massive goals for Team Canada. Yeah. With Ron Francis, he was true to his word. He wanted to be flexible when it comes to the cap, and he didn't bite at any of the big contracts, except for maybe Giordano. I expect he must have already had conversations when he's going with Mark and him bringing him into the team. Does this mean he's a front runner to be a captain and to be here long term?
There's a lot of schools of thought. Some think that if the Kraken are not competitive in year one, that he would be a trade deadline. He'll be sent off in the trade deadline because he's only got one more year. And I don't, a lot of people have been also saying, oh, he's going to be the first captain, leadership in the room, all that. And one thing if you look at across the roster so far, really young. And so you kind of need that veteran leadership. Somebody like Giordano, but I don't know if they'll name a captain, right? I don't think teams always name a captain right away. And I think it takes maybe a year or two to kind of mold into the captain. And I think Vegas didn't name their first captain until this year.
Yeah, you're right. They do lock up Penny Alexiak's brother, of course, Jamie, the big guy, 4.6 for 5 years. Adam Larson, $4 million for 4 years. So, of course, with locking up those two, they have such a complete defense, it already looks like. Like you already said, Giordano, possibly, depending on how the first season goes, could be moved. What about other guys that they selected on the back end, even including Vince Dunn? Could they be shipped pretty quickly then?
Well, I don't think so, because there's not a lot that I think are shippable right now. Some of them are really young. Certainly there are some others, but kind of the more veterans have a little bit more term on their contract, and those aren't the guys that you usually move at the deadline, Giordano being kind of the exception. So I don't expect a whole lot of these guys to change rosters, assuming they start the season on the Kraken. I mean, who knows in the next 3 or 4 days what happens around the draft or anything next week. That's when you see a little bit more shifting of the roster. So I think Giordano's the only one that I think, he could probably be on the move come come trade deadline. But I also think if they're competitive, they'll keep them.
That's true. So many other names were available. We'll get to Carey Price in a second. Vladimir Tarasenko, Max Domi, a couple members from Philadelphia, JVR, Voracek. You're trying to sell the game in Seattle as well. So, in my mind, is it possible maybe Ron Francis might have failed the team in any way in trying to sell the team, or maybe not getting one of those big names?
Well, it depends. If you think he's got responsibilities in the marketing department, then I think you could say, having somebody with a kind of a headline name like Carey Price would be really absolutely great for the franchise because people recognize it. But the reality is, not sure we're going to get into it just yet, but the term remaining on his contract, and Tarasenko's also a name, but at the same time, like if he's building for the future, and like you said, Peter, he's building for he stuck to his word, and that means creating cap space and using that to his advantage and not biting on those veteran contracts. I am surprised that at least one or two of those guys weren't selected. Particular JVR. I think Philadelphia had a couple options there, but for the most part, I think they did a solid. And who knows what comes up. And I do think maybe he gets active in free agency. I'm not a big fan of playing in the dark arts of free agency because that's when you usually overpay and have long terms. But I mean, what if they could land Landeskog and Danault, right? They literally have the cap space for that. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but that's the advantage of not selecting JVR and Carey Price, right? You now can sign those two guys as a possibility. I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but that's the flexibility. And not to mention, people are going to try to launder players through Seattle to shave off some cap space from their cap hit. So he's got a lot of options. He still has a lot of option now. If he would have drafted those big ticket guys, the options start to get limited.
You said you've looked at the rosters hard for 2 years. Looks like even Yanni Gourde could be out for surgery to start the season. They are maybe not up to par in that center department. They're not even at the cap floor. It's their need at least $10 million to go there. They're obviously 30.7 currently under the cap max. Are they going to be at least going out there looking for that free agent center? You mentioned Danault on Montreal. Another name is Paul Stastny going to another expansion team. What other names do you think possibly could go?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that threw me for a loop, and I'm not pretending to know more than I really do, but Ottawa protected Linus Ullmark, and now they have their goalies kind of locked up. So I don't think they would go after Linus Ullmark, but you're right, they need a center, so that's why I like to know. I think they're looking at value right now, and somebody who's been probably underutilized places. And then, I don't know if Matty Beniers, assuming they select him second overall, maybe they hustle him into the NHL, but I think that would be a mistake, and I don't see that organization doing this.
In the end, Ian, Carey Price wasn't taken. Are Habs fans feeling a sigh of relief, or did they actually are like kind of, could have had that cap hit off the books?
Yeah, I think we're all sort of feeling both feelings at the same time. It would have been really nice to get that cap hit off the book. He's got, I think, 5 years left at $10.5 million. I do think it was a calculated risk. It was Carey Price's idea from all reports that, Marc Bergevin was struggling to try to either A, find a suitor for Jake Allen, or B, try to convince Ron Francis to not take Jake Allen. Price came to him at the 11th hour, actually after it, if you're considering when he was supposed to tell them when he was going to waive his no trade clause, and said, well, expose me, they won't take me. And he was right, although I don't think, and from the beginning I thought this, I don't think it was as easy of a no as a lot of people made it out to be. that he's got 10.5 million and he's got to have his knee or hip cleaned up this summer. It's a no. It's an easy no. I really don't think it was that easy of a no for all the reasons that were stated earlier. He's from the area. He's a a well-known guy in the league. You could tell a lot of people in Seattle at the draft didn't know that, he was already off the board, by the nature of the leaks, because when they announced his name, there was a really big cheer. Mm-hmm. And sitting at home, I kind of felt bad. I was like, well, they really want him. It's not to say Canadiens fans don't, but, to circle back, the reaction was certainly mixed. It would have been nice to get that cap hit off. But at the end of the day, the winningest goaltender in the history of the Montreal Canadiens is still the goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens. Like I think that matters a lot.
So I saw a lot of people talking about what a great face of the franchise he would be. And I love Carey Price. I think he's a really great person, but I also don't see him like outwardly talking to the media. He's not very talkative. And so I was wondering if, not that would be I would never take that in consideration to selecting my goalie, that he's a marketing piece, but I do wonder if he really didn't have as much. He's more of a name, but he's not so much of a spokesman. And maybe that's his approach to the Montreal media. I know it can be tougher up there, but I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far off. I think a lot of people looked at this draft and saw, and we're trying to draw parallels to the Vegas selection. And, they picked a goalie and that was their big pick. And he was a franchise guy for Pittsburgh. And, we can make that leap really easily. And, while he's got the pedigree to back it up, I think you're right. Like Carey Price interacting with the Montreal media is still one of the funniest things to me. Like there was a situation, I think they asked, I don't remember the reporter, but it was in the playoffs, and they asked him, like, your team didn't give up a lot of shots and you gave up some goals. How do you feel? And he just said, we won the game. Like that's Carey Price. Like that's who you're getting. He does mean, and I'm not the right person to say this, but he does mean quite a lot to Indigenous communities. He's still speaking out. Obviously his family, he comes from an Indigenous background. So I think that means a lot to a lot of people. He's I don't know, there's just this aura about him, but I think you're right. Like he's not really the big flashy guy they could have marketed. I don't think Seattle really picked a guy like that. And I think that suits them just fine.
Yeah.
I don't know how, and this is just wondering out loud what Ron Francis is doing. I wonder how many of these guys are here for the long haul. A lot of Vegas guys are still there, not all of them, but a lot of them. They went in a very different direction. So, I don't know if you need to pick your franchise star at the beginning of this expansion draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's spot on. That seems like a good assessment.
You're right. What do you guys believe, though, and Ian knows this, they brought in Jake Allen to supplement Carey Price during the season, so then Carey would be fine for come playoffs. Could they have done the same thing with the 1-2 tandem with Drieger coming in Seattle?
It's possible. I think, especially because Price got hurt this year, as he often does, unfortunately. And a lot of that has to do with his workload in the past. Jake Allen really saved the Canadiens' bacon this year. He finished the season as like a .907 goalie, which doesn't really paint the full picture, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, if you're of the belief that the Canadiens spent too much on goaltending this year, you probably don't like the idea of paying $15 million in goaltending, which is what Seattle would have done if they had both Drieger and Carey Price. I think it was Arpin Basu and the Athletic who used this analogy that Carey Price is the sports car and Jake Allen is the insurance and the maintenance of the sports car. Like you have to pay a lot to upkeep the sports car. That's how I've always looked at Carey Price, and I don't mind how much they spend on a backup goalie. But that obviously Ron Francis enjoys his cap flexibility. He's going to weaponize it, hopefully. I don't think that was part of his equation when building this team.
Yeah, and I think Traeger, he's a good goalie, but when he signed his extension with the Seattle Kraken, it was pretty clear they weren't going to take Carey Price even before the news came out about Carey Price because of that same 15 million in goaltending. Like that seems relatively insane, but it happens. Yeah, and that's one concern there is the goalies are pretty young and unproven in Seattle. So, that's why who knows, they might go after Ullmark, but that means they would probably have to flip another guy. So that just seems like too many variables to like control. And so I think this is who we're going with, these goalies.
Yeah, it sure does. You mentioned again, Chris Drieger locked him up 3 years, $3.5 million. They brought in as well Victor Vanacek from the Capitals and Joey Daccord from Ottawa. Do you feel that they're just gonna open end it and see who takes the net, or do you think they're automatically gonna go maybe a 50-50 and try them both out at least for a couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, I think Decord's probably starting in the AHL. I mean, that seems the right spot for him. And it's funny, I kind of like that pick because, you need somebody relatively reliable. And if you remember, Vegas used like 4 or 5 goalies their first year, right? Because they kept on losing them. So you need some relatively reliable, but I think they're going to platoon those guys. I think Drigger's probably got the position to start, but who knows? Like, I don't think he's locked into any one goalie, and if they're both playing well, that's probably a good problem to have.
From Montreal, the Seattle selected Cale Fleury. That's how many? Look, they took another Fleury, Hayden Fleury. The other Fleury was taken by Vegas. That's a couple of Fleuries going during expansion drafts.
Fleury's they're very popular for the expansion trade.
Yeah, it worked out well for Vegas.
Yeah. So what are they getting out of Cale Fleury in Seattle, Ian?
It's tough. He's a young guy. He missed most of last season because of injury. He likes to play heavy when he can. He needs to learn to pick his spots a little bit better, as most, rough and tumble defensemen do. It's funny though, because he's kind of got like a baby face, but he does like to throw the body around. It was an interesting pick just because, he's kind of a relative unknown around the league, but unless you were picking, Jonathan Drouin or Paul Byron or Carey Price, that's what you were getting from the Canadians. It was either, I think most people kind of thought it would be Brett Kulak, but seeing how many defensemen they picked, it's sort of, NHL level defensemen they picked, it sort of makes sense that they picked Fleury. He's probably going to start in the American Hockey League. But he's a good young right shot defenseman. I don't know what his ceiling is, but I don't think you can have too many right-hand shot defensemen. They don't, NHL caliber ones, which I do believe he will be one day. They don't really grow on trees.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with a couple of the picks where they just went really young, right? It was like, right. Okay, we don't need another, top 4, top 6 or whatever. Let's just get as young as we can. And, like it by his numbers, and I haven't seen him play at all this year, but Cale Fleury looked, like he wasn't playing that much. Obviously, you mentioned the injuries, but what's funny is Hayden Fleury actually was out here for the event, and he seemed really excited. He seemed really happy to get going, and and I think they alluded to that on the broadcast that Hayden Fleury was actually drafted by Ron Francis. So there might be a tie there, and he played junior in the WHL, so he's been through the area a couple times. So pretty cool to see the brothers come together, and who knows, maybe they train a little harder together now that they're training for the same team. So it's pretty cool, I think.
Hayden really played up that crowd. That was really cool to see. He got like a glimmer in his eye. He gave a little smirk when he said best fans in the NHL. Like I think he thrives in that market. That's going to be really cool to see.
Yeah, and I'm hoping like one of those guys like really leans in and wants to be like part of the community and is out there, outspoken.
Yeah.
And a couple of them were really cool on stage, but they're professionals, are used to this. But Alexiak was also another one that seemed to be a funny thing. As soon as he smiled and everybody saw his missing tooth, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is hockey, baby." So for the people that aren't maybe that familiar with hockey, they recognize that as a rite of passage, missing your teeth. So
I actually enjoyed Tanev coming out and even
Yeah,
making fun of himself. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, they're gonna fall in love with that player really quick.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good. Before we go, Ian, we all have heard what's going on with Captain Shea Weber of the Canadiens, out for the season next year. What does his future look like, if you can put any words to that?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Bergevin had his media availability on Thursday morning, and he said he won't play the regular season. Likely his career's over, which is it's a shame. It's a shame for a few reasons. It sucks because, he was playing for so long on all of the injuries that he had. I think the ankle injury started a few years ago. He blocked a shot. And just, there was the Nick Kiprios report that came out that said he might be done, and he was back 2 weeks later. It becomes kind of reasonable to see now that he was probably playing through that. From what I've heard from Mark Bergevin, he struggles with just like daily activities, like waking up and morning activities. Like, they're just hard to do with the quality of injuries that he has. But it also sucks because it seems like, there's a growing fear around the league that the Canadiens are taking advantage of some long-term injured reserve loophole, when I think everyone in their right mind knows that they'd rather have Shea Weber playing hockey for them. It stinks because, like, at the end of the Stanley Cup final, everyone flocked to him. They all knew they knew what we learned much later, which is that he was probably done. He means quite a bit to that locker room, to the franchise. I mean, that's Mark Bergevin's trademark move. And while it was ridiculed at the time, it was a good trade. I think we can look back on it and say the Canadiens did particularly well in that deal. Where it goes from here, we have to wait. The NHL is involved now because it's a long-term injured situation. They need to make sure that his medical records, fit that of somebody who should be on long-term injured reserve. This is just me thinking out loud. I have no reason to believe any of this is true, but you wonder if he's contemplating retirement now, and if so, what that means to the Nashville Predators, who will eat some serious cap recapture penalties for that offer sheet that they matched from Philadelphia. Does that preclude a trade from the Canadiens to Nashville? Mark Bergevin says, hey, I'm not going to put him on long-term injured reserve. He's going to retire. You either trade for him or he retires and he ruins your cap situation for the next 4 years. So it's very fluid right now. It just stinks. I'd rather have him playing. I think that's the cap space is nice. But with him out and with Carey Price, dealing with injuries of his own, it seems very likely that the Canadiens next year are going to look a lot different and are going to have a really big hole in the leadership of that team.
Yeah, it's hard news to hear. I could see in Weber's emotions, even during the playoffs, especially even during that final, that he was a different Weber and it was hitting him harder. During those games.
And I don't like to. We always like to glorify that, to say that this guy's a warrior and he's playing through injury. The one that always comes to mind was 2011 when Patrice Bergeron was playing with a punctured lung in the Stanley Cup final. That stuff's cool in the sense that it builds legends, but like, these guys have lives after hockey. They need to take care of themselves. I hope that Weber is able to do that. Knowing that, he did have a very, very impressive NHL career. It stinks that it ends this way. He deserved more than what he got out of the ending of his career.
An interesting summer awaits for the league, but especially Seattle and Montreal. Again, you can find them on Twitter at NHL2 Seattle for John and at maybe it's Ian for Ian. I can't wait for puck drop, guys. The NHL released the schedule today. The Kraken will be playing on opening night, October 12th, versus the Vegas Golden Knights in their inaugural season. John, how does that feel to hear that?
That's pretty crazy. Something I got a text when the announcement was made for the Vegas Golden Knights first game. I got text from Vegas because I have a couple of friends down there, and they're like, "Are you coming down?" I'm like, "Why would I come down?" They're like, "You got to come down." And then by the end of the night, I'm like, "I'm going down." So pretty excited, pretty crazy. I was just looking at the schedule and circling some. Matt Barzal played out here, junior hockey, and so when the Islanders come to town, that's going to be a big deal. And Canadians are playing in October, I believe. It's like the second home game, which is pretty cool because of Montreal might not remember it, but we kind of hang on to it. And I certainly don't remember it because I wasn't alive, but the 1917 Stanley Cup. And it's something that hockey fans in the area love to tell people about, is that, they were the first American team to win the Stanley Cup against the Montreal Canadiens. So that's got a little extra kind of connection beyond just being Montreal, right? But there is a connection with Seattle. So people are looking forward to that one as well.
Winner of that game wins the 1919 Stanley Cup. That one was canceled.
Point.
So the winner, I was kind of hoping Montreal might be their first game, so we could just get that out of the way.
Yeah,
but yeah, winner wins the 1919 Stanley Cup.
Maybe we'll hang a banner that night too.
That'd be excellent.
Oh, that'd be funny.
All right. On that note, again, gentlemen, thank you for stopping by. Thanks to our guests this week, John Barr and Ian Boisvert. Great getting to talk to John after some time now about how fun the draft was at Gasworks Park. And Ian, with how many things have already happened from being so close to winning Lord Stanley to the current news in Montreal. Remember, if you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode, or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can also contact us on our website. You can use the hashtag at Jablam Sports, Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM, and our website is jablamsports.com/contact for our contact page there. Please check out our website. Go to jablamsports.com to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode, including this one. And you'll get our guests' info and links to things we mentioned on this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Also, follow us on our Facebook group, Jablam Sports. Check us out, folks. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.